Have you ever felt like you're a nobody, you're invisible? Well, that's a little bit like how I felt when I retired recently. And why was that? Well, quite simply, my identity had been killed off. Now, I had worked in the computer industry for almost 4 decades. And in that time, my career was a reference point, and I identified very much with what I did for a living. It was a pretty good career. I traveled all over the world. I worked with some amazing people, developed software that was used by literally millions of customers. And I constantly learned new things and new skills in step with the developments in technology. And I thought, of course, that I was very well prepared for all this, for retirement. But when retirement came along, all of this vanished. But in my preparation for retirement, I went on a pre-retirement course. And there they told me a few things about, the practicalities and so on. And didn't really emphasize the fact that once I retired, the impact of losing my identity could be an issue. I also have some fairly interesting hobbies. I keep bees. And, as an example, when I first started, the day after I got my bees, I opened the hive and promptly killed the queen. I've improved a little bit since then, but I have a lot to learn yet. And so before I become good, I need to learn an awful lot more. I fish. And I remember the very first fish I caught. I was about 4 years old, and it was about this big. But to me, it was a whale. And ever since, no matter how big a fish I catch, it's not quite the same. And I'm not quite sure who was better hooked, that fish or me, because I'm still at it all these years later. I also have retained my passion for the technology. And, I have a lot of little projects that I'm interested in completing. In fact, I've got one that combines the bees and the technology, where I have instrumented the hives in the garden with temperature and humidity sensors and cameras, and so it's a real geeky sort of couple of beehives there. But the problem was that I was not as well prepared as I expected. And I felt this loss of identity and went through basically the 5 stages of grief. So first it was denial, where I changed my LinkedIn profile to say that I was considering my options. And I told people that I had taken early retirement, as though that wasn't a real retirement. Then moved into anger, and I said to myself, that was a really stupid thing to do. You could have stayed on there for a few years. And, I felt like this was another fine mess I got myself into. But then I moved on to bargaining. And I thought to myself, maybe I could go back to work. But then I thought, well, maybe I could start up my own company. And I dutifully signed up for a Start Your Own Business course. And this was probably one of the biggest surprises. My friends and ex-colleagues and even government agencies came rushing out to offer me help and support. But I'm not convinced I want to commit to such a big undertaking. I mean, the hours, long hours and weekends and so on involved in building up a startup are pretty heavy duty. So, then after that, then I went into the traditional depression, which was just, I felt like, goodness, what on earth am I going to do? I'm stuck at this. And it's probably what motivated me to come along and speak here tonight. And then finally into acceptance. So now I have an enormous amount of free time, far more than I ever had over the past 40 years. And I have the freedom to do whatever I want to do. So that's a big step forward. But and the thing is that I'm not alone in this. This is quite a common thing. And if you look on the web, you see people who have a problem with the separation from their identity after work. And you have to ask, why did I make that connection between identity and work? And why was it that I saw myself as the computer guy rather than the guy who worked for a computer company? So why I chose what I did rather than who I was. And the reason is, quite simply, is that society values doing things. Society values being productive. And of course, that automatically lends you to put your work sort of front and center, and your world tends then to revolve around your work. And of course, once you retire, that productivity goes and that sense of worth goes. So now that I've retired, am I a lesser being? Am I somehow less value to society? And of course, when I talk to someone and say that I've retired, this societal judgment kicks in and they come with some sort of platitudes like, oh, good for you, or I wish I was. But no, they don't. They really don't. So what is the fix? And of course, there is a simple fix, and that is that you have to pick something that gives you a sense of achievement and build on that. Something that makes you feel like a job well done when you were in the workforce. And so where does that come from? So all these questions arise. So who am I? Where do I get the motivation for some new identity? And where does it come from, and how do I create it? And so the easiest thing to do is to pick something that you're passionate about, something you believe in. And, it might be a hobby, or it could be, whatever else that something you liked doing when you were working that didn't feel like work. It could be something that you enjoy doing all the time, but, something. And of course, for some people, doing absolutely nothing is the perfect solution. Then, if you can't think of something to do, you can base it off, you've spent years building skills and building expertise in some particular fields, or maybe multiple fields. And these are useful to other people in your community. You can teach, you can mentor, you can volunteer. But you can build something based on the past, something new that's rooted back in your experience. Have you ever regretted not doing something? When you were young, did you have some passions that you never followed up on? In fact, when you were a child, they said, follow your dreams. So now's your opportunity. But the thing is that you have to be selfish. You have to say, this is something that you want to do, something that interests you, something that will give you a something to do moving on into the future. So for me, what I did was, I've obviously going to continue with my bees. In fact, last week, recently, I set up a new apiary in a very idyllic spot with sunflower fields and guarded by a couple of alpacas, which is pretty unusual. But I'm continuing with that, and I'm actually going to take the senior beekeeping exams this year, or next year. I'm studying for them now. Fishing, well, I've already booked a fishing trip to the Arctic. In the summertime. It's a lot warmer than the winter. I'm going to continue. I'm going to make sure that bee spy thing is properly completed. And I'm also going to continue. I've decided I'm going to continue maybe with this whole idea of a startup and see where that leads. But for anybody else, it's up to you. You now have the freedom to make your decisions, to decide what to do. And so the thing to remember is, in the words of C.S. Lewis, you're never too old to set a new goal or dream a new dream. Thank you.